This is the audio for a post on the Movements in America Substack. Check out the website at movementsinamerica.substack.com. Link is in the description. One of my goals in making this Substack was to get some docs out of my Google Drive and onto a website where it could be more easily accessed. Below is one of those documents. It's a case study of the first church planting movement in the modern West. I believe I got it from Steve Smith some years ago. I've copied it verbatim except for a few headings I added for clarity. I enjoy reading it every so often and hope you learn from it as I have. It's a lengthy case study, so I'm going to break it up into 2 posts. Western Europe Case Study. March 2017. Size of the movement at this writing. About 500 house churches. Status. Active/plateaued/fizzled at writing. Active. Where are you on the CPM continuum? 5. CPM. Consistent multiple streams of 4th-generation churches. Name of focus group. Majority people of a Western European country. Historical narrative of work among the group. Personal background. When I was 15, I really searched for God with all my heart in my daily prayer times between 7 and 8 p.m. Monday was my fasting day. At that time, I experienced a calling, which even up to today feels very real. I saw a map of my country with a lot of dots on the map, and from that day, I started to share the gospel with my classmates. I invited them to come to church with me and read the Bible together, and that's what we did. In the first year, about 5 or 6 friends from my class came to Christ. That's when I would say I started the first church ever. Some of them really got in trouble at home when they told their parents they wanted to be serious followers of Jesus. That's how everything started. A couple of years later, we experienced great openness, and for about 2.5 years, everything was possible. A few of my friends and I went to the headmaster in local schools in the neighboring villages and towns, and we asked to share about Christ. I was in my late teens, and my friends were about the same age. And we really taught about Christ to whole schools. And on weekends in those villages, we did a youth service and some youth activities to get them together. After a couple of years, the situation started to change and new regulations and laws came in. That's when I hit the biggest identity crisis in my life. Because all the things that had worked before didn't work anymore. I was finished with high school and hadn't decided what to do with my life. The only thing I really wanted to do at that time was to serve the Lord and continue what I had been doing. I had been traveling around the country trying to look for, what I call now, someone to disciple me. I met a lot of amazing people, but they all wanted me to join their Bible schools and ministries. I never heard anybody say, "Wow, this is what you have started? Can I come and visit you? I would like to see it. I would like to see how to develop it." So I was really frustrated. I didn't know any better, so I went to study theology at a liberal theological university. It didn't help me much. For 4 years, I disappeared. I stopped going to church. I stopped praying. I stopped reaching out. I stopped pretty much everything. After that, I was so disillusioned that I took the first job I could find, in an English-speaking country. Then, after a couple of years, I moved to Asia in 1996. I started attending a church because I met a Christian who told me if I wanted to learn the language, I'd do better going to a church than a Buddhist temple. CPM Awakening. I ended up attending a church that was part of the most dynamic church planting movement in the country. Very charismatic, very Asian, very hierarchical, very authoritarian. For me, that was the perfect place. After 1 year, I heard Jesus say very clearly, "When you were 15, I called you. The calling is still on. You ran away. I haven't changed my mind." That evening, I knew I had to go back to God. The next morning, I told one of the church leaders about it, and he said, "Okay, I'm going to train you." So from day 1, he took me out evangelizing. He taught me Bible all day and took me out in the countryside for church planting. They took me into their life. I lived together with one couple for 1 year. They challenged me to start an international church with all the sex tourists and Westerners who had come to study Buddhism. That was how I really restarted. It was like learning to love again. After only a couple of months, it was very clear. I'm going to stay here for a bit longer to learn, but after that, I have to go back to my home country. Back home. I knew I wanted to start a church planting movement, with strong discipleship and unbelievers coming to Christ. So I came back to my country in 1999. I knew exactly one person in the city where I started. The only people committed to this vision were myself and an Asian woman who worked at the embassy as a diplomat. She supported me and opened her nice flat for meetings. We started reaching out from day one. I was reaching out everywhere, and she reached out to embassy people, wherever she met them. I deliberately kept myself outside the traditional Christian scene, and in the beginning only shared with people who had grown up outside the church. It was the subculture I was most used to. But it also really felt like that's what I should be doing. I should provide an environment where new believers can grow up first. After 3 months, we really had a breakthrough. The first couple came to Christ. Our country is not an easy place to evangelize. But it happened, and God spoke directly into people's lives. For example, we had invited one lady for coffee, and she was making fun of us when she left. She went to the subway and then called us 3 hours later and said, "I don't know what you guys did, but when I was standing at the traffic light, I suddenly knew everything you guys had said was true. God is real, and I have to change my life." So we visited her the same evening and baptized her about a week later. Those kinds of things happened, and I'm not sure where I would have been if that period hadn't happened. I can testify that even up until today, it can happen everywhere, and the Holy Spirit moves everywhere, and people are touched. That was in early 2000. There were a couple of baptisms, and things looked good. We had started a Sunday service right from the beginning. It looked absolutely unprofessional, but all these new believers thought something special is happening with us, so they brought their friends along. I probably would have continued down that road, but a couple of things happened. First, we were discipling on a one-to-one level. Up to today, I say, if somebody new comes to Christ, please try to really meet them every week for at least an hour, to pray, to study the Word of God, to help them get their life in order. Everything on top of that is bonus. But show them their own importance by meeting them one-on-one and helping them to understand they should be doing the same thing with people behind them. We've always done that, starting year 1, and we've never stopped. So my schedule quickly filled up with the discipleship, and I couldn't reach out much anymore. Also, there were no mature Christians involved, and all our new believers had limits in discipling the new people. So I would do it differently now, but I wouldn't compromise the one-on-one interaction, the very personal touch. Nowadays, I give leaders a different perspective. I ask, who behind you is already reaching out to others? Who behind you just needs help in the beginning? In the beginning, my focus was very much on church growth. Very little on how Jesus can help people get free, be delivered, and get routines in their lives. So nowadays, I say, focus on the very strongest and on the very weakest. Take the strongest together and take the weakest together. But don't burden new leaders with all the people who have problems. With the weakest, those who really need help, try to find different patterns. Take them together for breakfast once a week and use the time to really pray. Talk about problems and pray with them. But don't burden your next generation leaders too much with them. First House Church. Also, pretty quickly, the first of our new guys got admission to a university in a different town. He said, "We can do everything that we have seen. We can reach out, we can disciple, but we cannot start a Sunday service." So I realized very quickly, already in 2000 to 2001, that if we went with a Sunday service, it wouldn't work. It would be too slow. Then one of my friends said, "If you ever make me preach on a Sunday, I will leave. I cannot do that." He has changed his mind now, but that helped me realize that a Sunday service with preaching was not the model to use. So we started to communicate very clearly way back then. We will not start Sunday services. We will start communities. We will start house churches. But something else I would now do differently. We kept dabbling with a Sunday service for a very long time. Too long. The ministry grew step by step. There was no money involved at all. There were no missionary funds and no missions money from our own people. At the beginning, they were all new believers from an atheistic background. We were all working, trying to work as little as possible to have enough time. But that was also part of what we really wanted to see. I taught them, if you want to see a church planting movement, we have to set the pattern first. We have to be able to do it contrary to the normal church pattern here. So of course our time was incredibly limited. I got married in 2003, and we had our first child in 2005. That didn't help me have more time. That was definitely a reason to slow down. Another reason the growth slowed down for a while. Our first generation of believers were very excited, hard-working people. The next generation, who came to Christ through them, were more dependent on help. They saw a community of believers, a community that was warm and loving, and felt, that's a good group to be part of. It took us some years to get a good balance in between really helping people press forward and taking care of all the others. In the beginning, we didn't know how to do that. Right from the beginning, though, in 2001, we started first-generation groups in 2 or 3 other places in our country. From that time on, I met with all of them together once a quarter in one of the major cities. We prayed, and I taught a lot, more than I would now. For one thing, some biblical foundation was necessary, but at the same time, I didn't know what else to do besides teaching, and more teaching. They learned a lot, and the friendships were quite close. There were constant breakthroughs. People were always coming to Christ. But it took much longer than I had expected. I thought the growth would continue explosively, as it had at the beginning. But that wasn't how it happened. Slow down. In 2003, after experiencing the slowdown in growth, I started to pray and fast a lot. By 2004, we had 12 or 13 house churches. I felt it was time to establish a more stable leadership team for the whole country. I had a short list of brothers I felt would be good for that, and out of that list, I put together a team of 9, later 10 people to start to lead the work. We didn't know how to be a team together, but those were the people I felt God had given me. So for 2 years, we tried to form as a leadership team. I felt in my spirit, it's not good to just continue to just go forward. We have to establish a level of stability to be crazy enough to reach out and take the next steps of expansion. It took about 2 years for us to start functioning as a team. I heard God say very clearly, you always wanted to go into every county, every city, every subculture in this country. Now it's time to move again. Divide the country into 8 regions, and in those regions where you haven't started any house church yet, go in and begin to pioneer. At that time, we were not as dynamic as we are now. We didn't even know what to do. It took us 1 year to reshape our mindset and just get in the car in the morning, pray, and go to another city, and just go out in the street and start talking with people. During the first year, we were more trying to challenge the more experienced guys to move into some of those areas of the country. We did that from 2007 to 2010. In 2008, I got trained in an established pattern for evangelism. It helped us a lot in the years since then. We learned how to share with people anywhere, how to get to know people anywhere, and mentor people anywhere. We learned how to do it through telephone, through Skype, to just do it anywhere, wherever you find somebody willing to come to Christ and accept Jesus and start to be a disciple. That was when it became clear. Now it's time for 3 of us to go full-time, to help the apostolic work to grow. That was not possible part-time anymore. In 2008, I started traveling extensively. At that time, my wife was pregnant with our second child. But she released me a lot. I traveled every week. And we saw a major breakthrough. Once a year, every Pentecost, We all came together, and it was still small at that time, 200 to 250 people. But we came together and you could see the atmosphere change. There was a new excitement in the whole thing. This is the end of part 1 of the case study. I will post part 2 later this month. Thanks for listening. Be sure to pick up my book, Movements in America, on Amazon and Audible if you want to learn more about how God is multiplying disciples and churches around the United States. The link is in the description. Subscribe to this podcast and my Substack to stay up to date with my latest posts. One of the best ways to support this work is by leaving a 5-star review of this podcast. Thank you for the help.